Hello everyone, welcome to We Draw More. My name is Phil and this is Alternative to Top Ranked Commanders, Episode 7. At the time of recording, the 7th most popular commander on EDHREC is Sauron the Dark Lord. Sauron the Dark Lord currently features in over 29,960 decks. Sauron the Dark Lord is a 7/6 avatar horror for 3 and Grixis, which is blue, black and red, and they have Ward, sacrifice a legendary artifact or legendary creature. That means in order to target Sauron you need to sacrifice either a legendary artifact or a legendary creature, in addition to the casting cost of the spell that would be targeting it. That's probably the most expensive ward cost I've seen on any card. Sauron also has, whenever an opponent casts a spell, a mass orcs 1, we'll come back to that in a moment. They also have, whenever an army you control deals combat damage to a player, the ring tempts you. Whenever the ring tempts you, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 4 cards. So how does the ring tempt you? As the ring tempts you, you get an emblem named the Ring if you don't have one. Then your emblem gains its next ability. You choose a creature you control to become or remain your ring bearer. The ring can tempt you even if you don't control a creature. The ring gains its abilities in order from top to bottom. Once it gains an ability, it has that ability for the rest of the game. Each time the ring tempts you, you must choose a creature if you control one, and each player can have only one emblem named the Ring and only one ring bearer at a time. The ring itself has 4 abilities and they read: your ring bearer is legendary and can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. Whenever your ring bearer attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. Whenever your ring bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifices it at the end of combat. And whenever your ring bearer deals combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life. Sauron says, whenever an army you control deals combat damage to a player, the ring tempts you. So you attack with an army, and we'll look at what armies are in a moment, and that means the ring tempts you, so you get to get the ring if you haven't got it already, and then you can start going through these abilities. And the ring makes your creature who is the ring bearer unblockable by creatures with greater power, so that's quite useful. If it is blocked, then the creature blocking it will be sacrificed at the end of combat, and if it does actually manage to deal combat damage to a player, each of your opponents, not just that player, loses 3 life. And also, when it attacks, you get to loot through your library. Saruman the White Hand, who I think could have been an alternative to Sauron the Dark Lord, but I think you would definitely want to include in the deck, is 1 and Grixis for a 2/5 Avatar Wizard, and they have, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, a mass orcs X, where X is that spell's mana value, and usefully they have the rules text for a mass. Put X +1/+1 counters on an army you control. It's also an orc. If you don't control an army, create a 0/0 black orc army creature token first. So for Sauron the Dark Lord, when you amass orcs 1, if you do not have an orc army token in play, you will create one and you will put a +1/+1 counter on it. If you do have an orc army token in play, then you put an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And Sauron does that every time one of your opponents casts a spell. So that orc army will get very big very rapidly. Going back to Saruman for a minute, Saruman also has goblins and orcs you control have ward 2, which means not only will Saruman make that orc army bigger, it's also there are a couple of game changers associated with Sauron the Dark Lord that I wanted to just cover as part of this video. The first is Orcish Bowmasters, which is 1 and black for a 1/1 orc archer with flash. And they have, when Orcish Bowmasters enters the battlefield and whenever an opponent draws a card, except for the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, Orcish Bowmasters deals 1 damage to any target, then amass orcs 1. Given the amount of cards we are now set up to draw in Modern Commander, Orcish Bowmasters dishes out a lot of damage and creates a very large orc army very rapidly. The other card that is a game changer that I feel I cannot do this video without talking about is the One Ring. The One Ring is a legendary artifact for 4 colourless mana and has Indestructible. It also has, when the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring. And tap, put a burden counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. So in essence, the One Ring is indestructible itself. It can give you a huge amount of protection, which can stop you losing the game at a pinch, but it also lets you pay life for card draw. When I was looking at Sauron, there are a couple of cards I thought I'd like to mention as part of this video that aren't game changers. The first one is actually Lazartep Chancellor, who is Dimir, which is blue-black, and they're a 1/3 zombie wizard, and they have, whenever you discard a card, you may pay 1. If you do, amass 2. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on an army you control. If you don't control one, create a 0/0 black zombie army creature token first. Lazartep will create an army. In this case, it's a zombie army, but that doesn't matter too much. If you have an army in play, they will put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and they'll do that whenever you discard a card. Sauron the Dark Lord says, Whenever the ring tempts you, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 4 cards. So you can take advantage of that discard, use Lazotep Chancellor, put more +1/+1 counters on your army token. Another card I thought was interesting that actually synergizes with Sauron is Gandalf, Friend of the Shire. The Gandalf is a 2/4 avatar wizard, and it's 3 colourless and blue, and they have flash, and you may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. And Gandalf also has, whenever the ring tempts you, if you choose a creature other than Gandalf, Friend of the Shire, as your ring bearer, draw a card. Sauron has, whenever the ring tempts you, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 4 cards. If you stack those 2 triggers correctly, what happens is you discard your hand, you draw 4 cards, and then you draw an additional card. So you're actually drawing 5, which means you're getting the extra benefit from playing Gandalf in a Sauron deck, which I find slightly bizarre, but hey, that's the way Magic cards tend to work. Sauron the Dark Lord isn't the only version of Sauron available in Magic the Gathering. There are in fact 4 versions. The big daddy of them all is Sauron Lord of the Rings, who is 5 colourless and Grixis, and is a 9/9 avatar horror, and has, when you cast this spell, amass orcs 5, mill 5 cards, then return a creature card from your graveyards to the battlefield. Trample. Whenever a commander an opponent controls dies, the ring tempts you. I think Sauron Lord of the Rings is a big, splashy 1-cast spell. I don't think it works as a commander. It's too expensive. It can help you with graveyard recursion, and there are ways with blue to return it back to your hand. If you are able to cast it again, you can get the cast trigger again, and you can amass 5 orcs and mill 5 more cards, and put another creature card from your graveyards on the battlefield. But it's a very expensive way of playing Reanimator. Then we have Sauron the Lidless Eye, who is 3 in Rakdos, which is black-red, and is a 4/4 avatar horror. And they have, when Sauron the Lidless Eye enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature an opponent controls until the end step. Untap it. It gains haste until end of turn. 1 black, red, : creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. Each opponent loses 2 life. Firstly, Sauron lets you steal your opponent's creatures, the idea being that you sacrifice them before they return to your opponent's control. Sauron the Lidless Eye also has the ability to cause each opponent to lose 2 life repeatedly. While you can produce the 1 colourless black-red mana cost, you can do that over and over again. And I'm pretty sure if you looked into it, somebody somewhere has made that go infinite. It doesn't even actually have to go infinite, does it? It only has to happen 20 times. So if your opponents are on 40 life each, that happens 20 times, they lose 40 life, game over, you win. The final version of Sauron is actually mono black. They're 3 colourless and 2 black for a 4/4 avatar horror, and they're called Sauron the Necromancer, and they have menace. And whenever Sauron the Necromancer attacks, exile target creature card from your graveyard, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 3/3 black wraith with menace. At the beginning of the next end step, exile that token unless Sauron is your ring bearer. Note that Sauron the Necromancer does not have the ability to make the ring tempt you. It needs to have that built into the deck elsewhere, or you have to play Sauron the Necromancer as one of your 99, which I think is more likely. So what makes Sauron the Dark Lord the 7th most popular commander on EDHREC? Quite simply, it does everything. It protects itself, it creates a way for you to beat face, it lets you draw cards, and it also has that ability where the ring tempts you, and so you can have the abilities of the ring if you make him your ring bearer as well. All of that on a 7/6 body. To coin a phrase, he is pushed, like many modern commanders. My job is to try and find an alternative to Sauron, which means I need a commander that has protection, a commander that produces tokens, and a commander that has a way for you to draw cards. And there is a commander that will do all 3. And they are Elenda and Azor. And they are 3 in Esper, which is white, blue, black, and they are a 6/6 Vampire Knight Sphinx. They have flying, wards 2, so they have that protection. And they have, whenever Elenda and Azor attacks, you may pay X and Esper if you do draw X cards. So they have the ability to draw you cards. And they also have, at the beginning of each end step, you may pay 4 life. If you do, create a number of 1/1 black Vampire Knight creature tokens with lifelink equal to the number of cards you've drawn this turn. So they also have a way of putting, in this case, a lot of creature tokens into play, rather than one big one, but they do tick all of the boxes, and they would be my pick to play instead of Sauron the Dark Lord if I hadn't have already chosen them as my pick to play instead of Edgar Markov. And if you're interested in seeing that video and what I think of Elenda and Azor, I'll put the link in the comments. I think Elenda and Azor is one of the few commanders that actually has all 3 of those abilities on a single card. If we want to choose an alternative otherwise, I think it's going to be a pick 2 out of 3 situation, where we have draw, we have protection, and we have token production. In this case, I opted for looking at protection and token production. And the first card that came up was EDHREC and Nev Twin Casters, which is 2, and Simic, which is a green-blue. And they are a 2/2 Merfolk Wizard with Ward 2, so they've got that protection. And they have, if one or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. So that's not just creature tokens, that's clue tokens, that's treasure tokens, that's gold tokens, that's food tokens, any types of tokens you produce, they'll produce twice as many of them. And I thought about doing this video on EDHREC and Nev, and I decided I didn't want to do a video on a Simic card because I think Simic is playing the game on easy mode. Green and blue, I think, are the strongest pairing of colours in Commander. I may actually talk about colour pairings and Commander in a future podcast, so keep an eye out for it. Another card I looked at was Gissa the Hellraiser. Gissa's mono black, so they're 3 colourless and 2 black. They're a 4/4 human warlock with ward 2, pay 2 life. Gissa also has skeletons and zombies you control, get +1/+1 and have menace. And whenever you commit a crime, and a crime is targeting opponents, anything they control and or cards in their graveyard, create 2 tapped 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature tokens. Now keep in mind, if you create those 2/2 black and blue zombies, this is already giving them menace and +1/+1, so they're actually 3/3s with menace. And it also says this ability triggers only once each turn. The Gissa can produce tokens, she can produce quite a lot of tokens, and she's buffing them and giving them menace, which makes them harder to block. So she will very quickly put a zombie army into play, and that zombie army will very quickly be able to attack, although it's slowed because they come into play tapped. And again, I thought about Gissa, and I thought to myself, do I want to talk about a mono black zombie deck? And I thought, no, not really. So I carried on looking on Scryfall, and one card stands out. I think you can do a really cool build around it. And that card, Ovika Enigma Goliath. Ovika is a 6/6 Phyrexian Knight, a 5 colourless and Izzet, which is blue-red. So we're playing an Izzet deck. Ovika is actually quite expensive to get into play, so we are going to have to really heavily ramp as part of our deck, but that will work in our favour. Ovika has flying. They also have ward 3, pay 3 life. So they have quite a high protection cost, not as strong as Sauron's, but that is one of the strongest I've seen outside of Sauron. They also have, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create X/1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens, where X is the mana value of that spell. They gain haste until end of turn. One of the things that stood out for me is that you're attacking with these goblins that gain haste, but you don't lose them at the end of turn. Quite often, when you have red token producers, they'll produce token, often it's something like a 3/1 elemental. You'll be able to attack with it, but then it will die at the end of turn. These goblins get to stay around. The first thing I considered when looking at Ovika is we have our protection, we have our token production, but we don't have card draw. There's an obvious artifact we can put in our deck that will let us use those 1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens to draw cards. And that is Skull Clamp. The Skull Clamp is 1 colourless for an equipment, and it has equipped creature gets +1, -1. Whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards. And it has equip 1. So you pay 1 mana, you attach it to a 1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature token. The token dies because it gets -1, and therefore its toughness becomes 0, so it dies. When it dies, you get to draw 2 cards. Skull Clamp, if you have the creature tokens in play to attach it to, it's very, very efficient card draw. It's basically pay 1, draw 2 cards. As I was thinking about drawing cards, my thoughts turned to Kindred Discovery. Kindred Discovery is an enchantment which will trigger Ovika, and Kindred Discovery is 3 colourless and 2 blue, and has, as Kindred Discovery enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. In this situation, we're going to choose goblins. Whenever a creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield or attacks, draw a card. Now, when we cast Kindred Discovery, even if we do trigger Ovika, the goblins come into play before Kindred Discovery hits the table. But we do then have the opportunity, because those tokens have haste, to attack with them. We'll get 5 red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens. They have haste. We can attack with all 5. We'll get to draw 5 cards. At that point, we could cast those 5 cards, but we need a way of generating mana. And we can generate mana from our Phyrexian goblin creature tokens, and there are a few ways we can do this. The first way is to use Skirk Prospector. Skirk Prospector is a 1/1 goblin for 1 red, and simply has sacrifice a goblin, add red. The difficulty here is that we're playing both red and blue, so we're only going to be able to use that to cast our red spells. But if we draw 5 cards off of the back of Kindred Discovery, we are then able to sacrifice. And a way we could do that is with Phyrexian Altar. Hopefully we'll have something in our hand we can play with that. We can repeat the process. Now, if we could cast every spell that we drew, and they were all non-creature spells, we could just keep repeating that process. But because we're playing blue, we need a way to generate blue mana. Now, I appreciate Phyrexian Altar is expensive when it comes to actually buying one, but I wouldn't stop you using proxies in my playgroup, so it does depend on yours. Phyrexian Altar is a 3 colourless artifact and has sacrifice a creature, add 1 mana of any colour. And now we can produce blue mana and red mana, which means hopefully we can start the ball rolling, we can sacrifice our goblins, we can produce our mana, we can cast non-creature spells to a total of 5 mana, put 5 more tokens into play because we have cast 5 mana values worth of spells, and repeat. There is another way we can use the goblins to cast our spells for us, and that involves a card called Invasion of Segovia. 2 colours and blue for a battle, and the battle has, when Invasion of Segovia enters the battlefield, creates 2/1/1 blue Kraken creature tokens with trample. So we get a couple of tokens to start off with, which is kind of useful. And we have to deal the battle 4 damage. So when Invasion of Segovia comes into play, we will get 3 1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens that have haste, so we can attack with them. We can also attack with Ovika, hopefully. Ovika has flying, so hopefully it will be able to deal 6 damage to Invasion of Segovia. And Invasion of Segovia will be defeated, and it then gets exiled and comes back into play transformed as Cetus, Sea Tyrant of Segovia. And Cetus is a 3/3 serpent with non-creature spells you cast have Convoke. Your creatures can help cast those spells. Each creature you tap while casting a non-creature spell pays for 1 or 1 mana of that creature's colour. At the beginning of your end step, untap up to 4 target creatures. So the end step trigger isn't something we're interested in. We're interested in the Convoke ability. We are creating red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens. We also have a couple of blue Kraken creature tokens. We are drawing cards. We are casting spells. We are tapping our creatures to pay for our Convoke, or we are sacrificing them to get the mana we need. Any way we are doing it, we are cycling through our deck, casting lots of non-creature spells to produce lots of goblins that we are either sacrificing or tapping to repeat the process. We could repeat that process until we're blue in the face or we run out of cards, and we're not playing Thassa's Oracle, so we won't win the game at that point. But we have to have some way of winning the game. And the way we win the game is with cards like Perforus, God of the Forge. Perforus, God of the Forge is 3 colourless and red for a 6/5 god, and they have Indestructible. As long as your devotion to red is less than 5, Perforus isn't a creature. When another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Perforus deals 2 damage to each opponent. Very simple. Every time you cast a non-creature spell, you're putting Phyrexian goblin creature tokens into play. Every time that happens, Perforus will deal 2 damage to each of your opponent. You only have to get 20 goblins, and Perforus will kill everybody. Perforus, again, is a little bit on the expensive side, but there are other options. We've got Witty Roastmaster, 2 colourless and red for a 3/2 Devil Citizen with Alliance. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Witty Roastmaster deals 1 damage to each opponent. Okay, it takes you twice as long, but it's still doable. Another card's almost the same as Witty Roastmaster is Molten Gatekeeper, arguably a little bit better. They are 2 colourless and red for a 2/3 column, and they have, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Molten Gatekeeper deals 1 damage to each opponent. They also have Unearthed red. So if you've managed to play this early, or if it's ended up for some reason in your graveyard, you can unearth it. And so long as you're aiming to do the Kindred Discovery spell cycle on 1 turn, you can bring it back into play, and everything will be in place, and you'll be able to cycle through all your spells, put in lots of goblins, get them to pay for more mana to cast more spells, to draw more cards, create more goblins, to deal more damage, to eventually win the game. Another way, and possibly a slightly better way to do this, is with Impact Tremors. Impact Tremors is an enchantment, so it's a non-creature spell, so it actually will generate a couple of goblins, but they'll come into play before it does, so you won't get the damage. But it is a 1 colourless and red enchantment that has, whenever a creature you control enters, this enchantment deals 1 damage to each opponent. So it's very simple, but it is an enchantment, so it does trigger your goblins, which is helpful. Because we're playing we're playing blue and red, we don't have access to easy token doubling. We don't have Parallel Lives, which is in green. We don't have Anointed Procession, which is white. But we do have Krenko Mob Boss. Krenko Mob Boss is 2 colourless and 2 red for a 3/3 Goblin Warrior and simply has tap. Create X 1/1 red Goblin creature tokens, where X is the number of goblins you control. Now, if we time this right, and we've cast a non-creature spell and Ovika has produced a lot of goblins, and we tap Krenko Mob Boss, we'll produce that many again. We can then sacrifice or tap the mana or for the Convoke so that we can cast more spells, so we can draw more cards and we can churn through that cycle. The problem with Krenko Mob Boss is that you can only tap him once per turn unless you're able to untap him. Because we're playing blue, we can do this. The bestest boy in our deck is Chakram Retriever, who is 4 colourless and blue for a 2/4 Elemental Hound, and they have partner with Chakram Slinger. I'm not really that bothered about playing Chakram Slinger, they're not that good. But they do have, whenever you cast a spell during your turn, untap target creature. So we're casting spells anyway to create our Phyrexian Goblin creature tokens, to be able to then draw cards, to be able to then cast more spells using mana produced from sacrificing those Goblin creature tokens. So why not tap Krenko Mob Boss to double those goblins, and then untap it when we cast a spell, and then we can tap it once we've produced more goblins. The way this plays out is that you'll cast a non-creature spell, you'll create X 1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens, where X is that spell's mana value. You will then tap Krenko Mob Boss to create X more red goblin creature tokens. Let's say X is 4, you will get 8 goblins in total. You'll draw 8 cards off of Kindred Discovery. You'll then have 8 possible mana you can use by either sacrificing those goblins or using Convoke to cast another spell. When you cast another spell, that's where Chakram Retriever comes into play, because he then means you can untap Krenko Mob Boss. You'll then produce more goblins with Ovika. You can then tap Krenko Mob Boss and create more goblins, and because you're creating lots more goblins, you're able to cast lots more spells and repeat that process. There is another, much older spell that lets you do this infinitely, and it's an enchantment, so it's a non-creature spell, and that's Intruder Alarm. Intruder Alarm is an enchantment from 8th edition, which is 2 colourless and blue, and it says creatures don't untap during their controller's untap steps. Whenever a creature comes into play, untap all creatures. The hope here is that you'll either have Intruder Alarm in your hand, or you'll draw it as you're going through this process, and you can play it. And once you've played it, as soon as you have goblins coming into play, they're untapping all your goblins, which is helping you to pay for your Convoke costs. They also will untap Krenko Mob Boss, who will then be able to be tapped to produce more goblins, who will then also untap Krenko Mob Boss, who will then be able to be tapped and create more goblins, and so on and so forth. The only downside here is that the goblins that Krenko is producing don't have haste, so you can't just overrun your opponents on that turn. But that's not your goal. Your goal here is to deal damage because of those creatures coming into play. What we are actually doing here is playing a form of goblin spellslinger called Storm, and it's exemplified by a card called Empty the Warrens. Empty the Warrens is a sorcery, so it's 3 colourless and red, and therefore it is a non-creature spell, so it will generate 4 1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens. But it also has Storm, which says when you cast this spell, copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. So if you can hold on to Empty the Warrens until you've cast, let's say, 5 other spells, although you could go much higher if this all works out properly, then you'll get 2 red goblin creature tokens for every spell you've cast. So if you've cast 5, you'll get 10 extra goblin creature tokens. You'll also get 4 Phyrexian goblin creature tokens from casting the spell to give you a total of 14 goblins. So if you have Kindred Discovery in play, you'll draw 14 cards. You can then use those 14 goblins to produce enough mana to cast some of those spells and repeat the process. Now, we've talked about producing more goblins to get more upside, but the other way to get more upside is to make your spells cheaper. Blue and red tends to do this by reducing the casting cost of sorceries and instants, such as Magnus the Red. Magnus the Red is a 4/5 Demon Primarch for 3 and is it, again blue-red, and they have flying. They have Unearthly Power. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each creature token you control. So in this case, if we've got plenty of creature tokens in play, our instant and sorceries become very cheap. Magnus the Red also has Blade of Magnus. Whenever Magnus the Red deals combat damage to a player, create a 3/3 red spawn creature token. We're not interested in that. The reason we're playing it is because it makes our spells cheaper. Another way to offset the cost of our spells is with Bergi, God of Storytelling, who is 2 colours and red for 3/3 God, and they have whenever you cast a spell, add red. Till end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. I'm not worried about the boasting ability, I'm not worried about her backside. It's the fact that she gives us red mana every time we cast a spell, means we can use that to cast more spells. And there are a couple of other cards that we should be playing that do this as well, and they will also help us get Ovika into play. The first one is Sapphire Medallion, and the other one is Ruby Medallion, and they are both artifacts. They both cast 2, and Ruby Medallion says red spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and Sapphire Medallion says blue spells that you cast cost 1 less to cast. So between them, they'll make our spells cheaper. The net effect of this is that as we are casting non-creature spells, we will produce more goblins than the spells actually cast, so we will end up with an excess of goblins, particularly when we're sacrificing them to produce the mana to cast the spells in the first place. Another really useful spell, and I think is a new one from Avatar The Last Airbender, is Longshot Rebel Bowman. They are 3 colourless and red for a 3/3 human rebel ally, and they have reach. They also have non-creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. That makes all of our spells, whether they're red, blue or colourless, cheaper. And it also has, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Longshot deals 2 damage to each opponent. So not only is it helping us to cast our non-creature spells, which saves our goblins in the first place, but it's also damaging our opponents when we do so, which in turn is helping with our win con. Longshot Rebel Bowman really is the perfect fit for this deck. Another card I thought that would be good in this deck is Archmage of Runes. Now, Archmage of Runes is 3 colourless and 2 blue for a 3/6 giant wizard, and they have instant and sorcery spells that you cast cost 1 less to cast, but they also have, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. So they turn all of our instant and sorcery cards into cantrips. We are at the moment heavily relying Kindred Discovery or Skull Clamp for drawing cards so that we can cast more spells. So if we can draw cards off of casting the spells, such as Archmage of the Runes allows us to be able to do so, then we have less reliance on Kindred Discovery to be drawing the cards. Another really useful creature that can help us to do this is Arjun the Shifting Flame. Arjun the Shifting Flame is a 5/5 Sphinx wizard for 4 colourless and is it, and they have flying, and they have whenever you cast a spell, put the cards in your hand on the bottom of your library in any order, then draw that many cards. Because they are only replacing the cards left in your hand when you're casting spells, not drawing you extra cards, you will eventually run out of cards. However, they do make it easier to find non-creature spells to cast to keep the Ovika cycle going, and therefore they can be used at a pinch instead of Kindred Discovery, but you do probably need additional draw effects in the deck alongside them. Speaking of additional draw effects, we could also play Jin-Gitaxias. Jin-Gitaxias is 3 colourless and 2 blue for a 5/5 Phyrexian Praetor, and they have Ward 2. Protection is always useful. And they have whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, draw a card. They let us draw a card whenever we cast a non-creature spell. Remember, we're trying to cast non-creature spells anyway to get our goblin creature tokens. So Jin-Gitaxias lets us draw extra cards, which hopefully we can then cast, and so we can repeat the process in that way. The only snag there, of course, is if we draw a land, and that's where Arjun would come into play, because Arjun would let us cycle through our cards. Another card I looked at, which I thought would be useful in deck, is Shantoto Tactician Magician. They are 1 and is it for a 0/4 dwarf wizard. And they have, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Shantoto gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. We're not too worried about that part. It's the next part we're really concerned about, because it says if X is 4 or more, draw a card. So if we cast a non-creature spell where the mana value is 4 or more, then Shantoto also lets us draw a card. To round up this video, there's one large creature I would think I would be amiss to not discuss when we're talking about a deck which is it Spellslingers? And that is Niv-Mizzet himself. Niv-Mizzet Perun, in this case, is 3 blue, 3 red for a 5/5 dragon wizard, and they have this spell can't be countered and flying. And the first of their 2 relevant abilities reads, whenever you draw a card, Niv-Mizzet Perun deals 1 damage to any target. And then they also have, whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, that's a player, so that's you or your opponents, you draw a card. When you draw a card, you get to deal damage. Given that we're cycling through our deck by drawing lots of cards, whether that would be with a card like Shantoto, or a card like Arjun, or a card like Kindred Discovery, we can be dealing damage with Niv-Mizzet. Hopefully some of those will be sorceries, and some of those will be instants, and so we can also get to draw more cards and do more damage with Niv-Mizzet. I really hope you like my choice of Ovika as an alternative to Sauron the Dark Lord. I know they're very different decks, but I do think Ovika actually deserves a look, because apart from being quite a high casting cost to get into play originally, I think the whole Spellslinger and Goblins interaction works really, really well, and I think there's a lot of cards to support it. I also think there's space for new cards to come into the deck going forwards, as we've seen with cards like Shantoto and the Archer. Why not let me know in the comments what commander you might choose as an alternative to Sauron the Dark Lord? And if you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and tick the bell so that you get notifications whenever I release a video in the future. Thanks again for watching.